The smell of burnt coffee and the sound of my own heartbeat are what I remember most from that night. I had been standing in the parking garage of Meridian Tower for 11 minutes, staring at the scratch along the driver's side of my sister's Audi. A long, ugly gash starting from the rear panel and ending just behind the front wheel. Well, like someone had dragged a key across it with real intention. Except it wasn't a key. It was a concrete support pillar on the third level of the Finley & Associates parking structure, and the person who had put my sister's car into that pillar had been my brother. He was already gone by the time I got there. He had called me in a panic at 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, his voice slipping between words the way it does when he's had too much, and asked me to come get him. I had left my apartment without finishing dinner. Of course I had. That's what I always did. When I arrived, his car was fine. He had driven his own car to the garage and left it there after the happy hour that had apparently become a 7-hour event. He had borrowed my sister's car earlier that afternoon to run errands. She had handed him the keys without thinking twice because she was busy with her twins, and he was her golden boy, and golden boys don't have consequences, they just have explanations. The Audi was parked crooked, nose first into a pillar. The airbag had not deployed, but the hood was dented in on the driver's side and the front bumper had cracked clean through on the left. My brother was sitting on the curb near the stairwell door, his tie loose, his jacket folded neatly in his lap like he had just stepped out of a board meeting and not a car accident. He looked up at me and said, "I need you to say you were driving." I remember the fluorescent light in that garage. One of them was flickering. I stood there watching it flicker and thought, I should say no. I should call our sister right now and hand him the phone and let him explain. But I didn't. My sister called 2 minutes later. My brother answered. He looked at me while he talked. He said there had been a small incident with the car, nothing serious, and that I had been driving because I had borrowed it after he dropped it off, and that I was so sorry and would of course pay for everything. I watched him say this and I didn't move. He hung up and looked at me with that expression he has, the one that isn't quite gratitude and isn't quite relief, but is mostly just the assumption that things will work out because they always have. "She's not upset," he said. "She just wants to make sure you're okay." I wasn't okay. But I nodded. The next morning, the insurance claim became a problem. My sister had filed it that same night, and the claim triggered a review because the car was registered to her, but the driver listed was me, and I was not on her insurance policy. The adjuster called her directly and asked a series of questions, and that's when my sister called our mother, and our mother called me before 7 in the morning while I was still in bed. This could be a really big deal, my mother said. The way she said it, calm, measured, like she was reading from a script she had already practiced, told me she knew everything. Insurance fraud is a serious thing. If they find out what really happened, your brother could lose his job. You know his firm does background checks every 2 years. A DUI, even a minor incident that goes on record and it's over for him. I sat up in bed. "Mom, I wasn't driving. I know that," she said. "But right now, on paper, you are. And if you change the story now, it looks worse for everyone. It looks like a cover-up. It is a cover-up." She paused. Just a small pause. "Cassandra, your brother is 31 years old. He has a daughter. He has a career he has spent a decade building. What do you have to lose here, realistically? It's a fender bender. You have a clean record. You pay a small fine. Maybe your rates go up, and it's done. My name is Cassandra, but everyone calls me Cass. I am 28 years old. I work as a paralegal at a firm called Whitmore and Bell. I have a clean record, which is exactly why I knew, sitting in my bed with the phone against my ear, that what she was describing was not a small thing. I knew what insurance fraud looked like. I had filed the paperwork on 3 cases like it in the past year alone. "Mom, he'll pay for everything," she said. "Every cent. Deductible, rate increase, all of it. He promised. He promised," I repeated. "Cass, please." I said I'd think about it, which, in our family, means yes. My sister called me that afternoon. I expected the same script, but instead she cried. She apologized. She said she felt terrible that I was being put in this position, and that she had told our mother it wasn't fair, and that if I wanted to tell the truth, she would support me. She said this while crying. And I believed her, and I said no, it was fine, I would handle it. What I didn't know then, and what I found out later, is that she had made that call on speakerphone with our mother sitting right next to her in the kitchen. My sister is not a bad person. She is a person who has spent her whole life inside a structure that rewards compliance, and she didn't know how to exist outside of it. I gave my statement to the insurance adjuster the following morning. I said I had been driving. I said I misjudged the distance to the pillar. I said I was sorry. The adjuster was a tired-sounding man who had clearly heard worse, and he accepted my statement without drama. My brother sent me a text that said, "You're the best. I owe you big." I saved that text. I didn't know yet why I saved it. I just did. 3 weeks passed. My brother paid for the repairs as promised. The deductible. The rental car my sister used while the Audi was in the shop. He sent me a screenshot of the payment confirmations with a thumbs-up emoji. My insurance rate had not yet updated, but the letter was coming. I knew that. He knew that. We didn't discuss it. What I did not know was that the parking garage at Meridian Tower had security cameras on every level. I knew they existed in theory, most garages do, but I had not thought about them at all when I gave my statements because the thought had not occurred to me that anyone would pull that footage. The adjuster pulled the footage, not for the claim, for something else. Meridian Tower is a commercial building with multiple tenants, one of which is a financial advisory firm called Oaktree Capital Partners. My brother works for Oaktree. Oaktree had filed a separate security incident report that same week because of a concern about unauthorized vehicle access to the reserved floors of the garage, completely unrelated to my brother's accident. The building manager, in pulling footage for that report, flagged my brother's car on level 3. They flagged it because his keycard had been used to access a floor he had no authorization for at a time when he had already clocked out for the evening. This became Oaktree's problem, which became HR's problem, which became a formal internal review, and somewhere in that process, someone at Oaktree called my brother into a meeting and showed him a still frame from the garage footage. The frame showed him behind the wheel of my sister's Audi at 9:31 p.m., pulling out of a parking spot on level 3. He came to my apartment that night. He had never come to my apartment before. He always made me come to him. He sat on my couch with his elbows on his knees and told me that Oaktree's review had widened. They weren't just looking at the keycard issue, they were looking at everything. And the garage footage, which now showed him driving a car that was reported to insurance as being driven by someone else at a time that matched the incident exactly, was going to be a problem. They're going to figure out the claim was wrong, he said. The claim was fraudulent, I said. He looked at me. Cass, I committed insurance fraud, do you understand that? I did that, for you. I know. He rubbed his face. Which is why I need you to stay consistent. If you change the story now, you just told me there's footage of you driving the car. The footage shows me behind the wheel. It doesn't show the accident. The accident happened at a different angle, a blind spot. There's no clear footage of the actual impact. I looked at him for a long moment. I want to describe what it felt like to sit across from my brother in that moment. He is 3 years older than me. He taught me to ride a bike in the driveway of our parents' house in Naperville. He drove me to the hospital at 2 in the morning when I had an allergic reaction in college and I hadn't wanted to bother our parents. I have loved him unconditionally for my entire life. And I was looking at him on my couch, and I was watching him calculate, and I understood in a way that settled into my chest like something cold and permanent, that I was not a person to him right now. I was a variable. I was a resource he was trying to manage. If the review finds out the claim was fraudulent, he said, both of us are implicated. You filed the false statement, I let you. We both go down. That's not how it works, I said, because I'm a paralegal and I know exactly how it works. You were driving, you left the scene. You filed a false statement through a third party. That's on you. They won't see it that way. Yes, they will. He left angry. He texted me at midnight, don't do anything stupid. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and I thought about the insurance adjuster's tired voice and the statement I had signed and the text on my phone that said, you're the best. I owe you big. And I thought about my mother's voice at 7 in the morning saying, what do you have to lose? And I thought about my sister crying on speakerphone while our mother sat beside her. In the morning, I went to work. I work for Whitmore and Bell. I have worked there for 4 years. My supervising attorney is a woman named Philippa who is meticulous and kind and has zero tolerance for shortcuts. I had not told her anything. but I had been distracted for 3 weeks and she had noticed, and that morning she stopped at my desk and asked if everything was okay. I said yes. She looked at me for a second and then said, "If you ever need to talk through something, even hypothetically, my door is open." I said thank you. At 11:15 that morning, I pulled up the insurance claim I had filed and I read it again, beginning to end, my name, my statement, my signature on the digital form. And then I opened a second tab and I looked up the statute on insurance fraud in Illinois. I already knew it. I had looked it up the night my mother called me before 7 in the morning I chose not to look at it too carefully. Knowingly filing a false insurance claim is a Class 3 felony in Illinois, 2 to 5 years. I sat with that for a while. Then I opened my email and I started writing. Not to the insurance company. Not yet. I wrote to someone I had been sitting on for 3 weeks without fully understanding why. When the adjuster had concluded his call with me that first morning, he had been professional and routine, but he had also said one thing that I had written down on a post-it note and stuck to the edge of my monitor. He had said, if any additional information comes to light, the claim can be reopened. I had written it down because I am a paralegal and writing things down is muscle memory, but I had also written it down because somewhere in the part of me that still knew who I was, I had known I might need it. I wrote to the adjuster. I said that I had additional information relevant to the claim and would like to schedule a call at his convenience. He called me back within the hour. I told him the truth. All of it. I told him about the call from my brother, the parking garage, the statement I had signed, and why. I told him I was a paralegal and that I understood the implications and that I was disclosing voluntarily and in full. My voice was steady for most of it. It broke once, when I described my mother's call. I don't know why that was the part that got me, but it was. The adjuster was quiet for a moment after I finished. Then he said, "Thank you for coming forward, Ms. Donovan. I'm going to need to escalate this to our fraud investigation unit. You'll likely be contacted by them within a few days. You should also consider speaking with an attorney before that call." I said I would. I thanked him. I hung up and put my head down on my desk and breathed. Then I picked my head up and forwarded the email chain to Philippa with a note that said, "I need to talk to you. Today, if possible." She replied in 4 minutes, "Come in now." I spent 2 hours in her office. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, which is one of the things I respect most about her. And when I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "You did the right thing, both just now and by coming to me." She paused. "You should know that what you did initially, filing the false statement, is serious. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But voluntary disclosure, full cooperation, no prior record, that matters significantly. I'll refer you to a colleague for personal representation. His name is Martin Cho. He's good." I said, "Okay." "Is there anything else?" she asked. "Any documentation you have. I had the text. You're the best. I owe you big." I had saved it without knowing why, and now I knew why. I showed her. She looked at it. She nodded slowly. "That's useful," she said. What happened over the next 6 weeks I can only describe as the unraveling of something that had been held together by the belief that it would never actually be examined. My brother's internal review at Oaktree expanded in scope. The fraud investigation unit from the insurance company contacted both of us. The garage footage from Meridian Tower, which showed my brother behind the wheel before the incident, was subpoenaed. The footage of the actual impact was, as my brother had said, obscured by a blind spot. But the footage of him exiting the vehicle afterward and walking to the stairwell and not calling anyone was not. My brother hired a lawyer. So did I. Martin Cho was calm and precise and told me exactly what to expect at every stage, which helped more than I can say. My mother called me the week after the disclosure. She knew by then. She had found out through my sister, who had found out from our brother. She did not yell. She was quiet in the way that is worse than yelling. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "Mom, he would have handled it. You didn't have to. He was going to let me take a felony for him," I said. "A felony. Do you understand what that would have done to my career? My license eligibility? Everything I've worked for?" She was quiet. "I cannot lose my job over this," I said. "I am the only person in this family who has ever been asked to lose something so that no one else has to be uncomfortable." Another silence. Longer. He has a daughter, she said finally. I know he has a daughter, I said. I love her. And she should grow up knowing that her father is accountable for what he does. Not that there's always someone smaller to hand the consequences to. My mother didn't respond. After a moment, she said she had to go, and she hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand and I thought about how I would feel about that conversation in a year. I decided I would feel okay about it. Not good. Okay. The internal review at Oak Tree concluded first. My brother was placed on administrative leave pending the outcome of the insurance investigation. The unauthorized floor access turned out to be related to a separate personnel matter that I was not privy to, but it did not help his standing. The insurance investigation concluded 8 weeks after my disclosure. My brother was found to have caused the accident while impaired, to have fled the scene without reporting, and to have arranged for a false insurance claim to be filed on his behalf. The civil penalty was substantial. The insurance company referred the matter to the state's attorney. My situation was resolved differently. Full voluntary disclosure, cooperation throughout, no criminal history. Martin Cho was thorough and the outcome reflected that. I was not charged. I was issued a formal warning by the insurance company and required to complete a disclosure compliance course that I finished in one afternoon on my laptop. That was it. My brother did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that. The state's attorney accepted a plea agreement, probation, community service, mandatory alcohol assessment, and a civil judgment that will follow him for years. He lost his position at Oak Tree. The unauthorized floor access, I later found out from a family conversation I was not fully meant to hear, had involved a colleague and a relationship he had not disclosed to HR, which was its own separate disaster. My sister called me the night the investigation closed. She had known, I think, for some time that she had been positioned on the wrong side of this, and the call had the quality of someone trying to step back to where they actually stood. I'm sorry, she said, for the speakerphone, for not just saying it out loud from the beginning. I know, I said. I was scared he'd fall apart. He was already falling apart, I said. He just needed someone else to stand in front of it. She was quiet for a moment. That was always you. Yeah. I'm sorry. I know, I said again, and I meant it. My mother and I have not fully repaired things. We have dinners occasionally that are careful and surface level, and I think we both understand that the version of our relationship that existed before that phone call before 7 in the morning no longer exists. I don't know yet what replaces it. Maybe something better. Maybe something just honest. My brother and I don't talk much. He texted me on my birthday. I replied, that's where we are. What I keep coming back to, the thing that sits with me even now, is the post-it note. That small, automatic, professional reflex of writing down what the adjuster said because I write things down. If any additional information comes to light, the claim can be reopened. I had written it and stuck it to my monitor, and looked at it every day for 3 weeks and told myself I was keeping it for no reason, but the version of me that wrote it down knew. She already knew what she was going to need. I think about her a lot. That woman at her desk with her post-it note, holding the door open, just a crack, because she wasn't ready to walk through it yet. I have more compassion for her than I expected to. She was doing her best inside a structure that had been built very specifically to make her feel like the responsible one, the reliable one, the one with nothing at stake. She had plenty at stake. She just finally decided it was worth protecting. I still work at Whitmore and Bell. Philippa has not treated me differently, except that she gave me a more complex caseload 3 months after everything concluded, which is her way of saying she trusts me. Martin Cho and I had coffee last month, not professionally, just coffee, and he told me that voluntary disclosure cases with my outcome were rarer than people thought. Most people wait, he said, until it's too late to matter. I almost waited, I said, but you didn't. I thought about the post-it note, the flickering garage light, my brother on my couch, calculating. No, I said, I didn't. I paid for the coffee. It felt right. I've thought a lot about the woman I was on the night I stood in that parking garage, the flickering light, the smell of engine fluid and cold concrete, my brother's jacket folded neatly in his lap like none of it was his fault, because in his experience, none of it ever was. I said yes that night because I had been trained to say yes, not by any single moment, but by 1,000 small ones. Every family dinner where his needs reshuffled the room, every time a problem with his name on it somehow ended up with mine. I didn't notice the pattern while I was inside it. That's how patterns work. They feel like just the way things are. What I know now is that the consequences we avoid don't disappear, they just transfer. My brother avoided accountability for years, and every time he did, someone smaller absorbed what he should have carried. That night in the garage, it was my turn. And the thing about that transfer is that it's never framed as a transfer. It's framed as love. It's framed as love. It's framed as family. It's framed as, what do you really have to lose? I had everything to lose. I just hadn't been asked to count it before. The courage it took to call that adjuster back was not dramatic. It didn't feel like a turning point while it was happening. It felt like dialing a number and waiting for someone to pick up and telling the truth in a shaking voice. That's what most of the important moments in a life actually feel like. Quiet, a little terrifying, nothing like the movies. But here is what I believe now. The truth has a kind of structural integrity that a lie never does. A lie has to be maintained. It has to be consistent, remembered, defended. It needs other people to hold it up. The truth just sits there and holds itself. When I stopped trying to maintain the lie, I didn't fall apart. I got steadier. That steadiness was the first real thing I had felt in 3 weeks. Philippa trusted me with harder cases after everything concluded. Martin Cho said voluntary disclosure cases with my outcome were rarer than people think. My sister apologized. My brother texted me on my birthday. None of those outcomes were guaranteed, but none of them would have been possible if I had kept signing my name to something I knew was wrong. The post-it note is still in a drawer somewhere. I don't need it anymore, but I kept it because it reminds me of something I want to stay true about myself, that even when I was afraid, even when I had said yes to the wrong thing, some part of me was still writing things down, still leaving the door open, still waiting for the version of me who was ready to walk through it. Be that person. Not perfectly, not all at once. Just don't throw away the post-it note.